Hey brewers and beer lovers, welcome back to the garage. Today I am going to probably upset a lot of glass purists. I have two of these large snifters that are my preferred beer glass just because I like the way they feel in my hand, and like everything about enjoying beer is subjective, so I kind of default back to a philosophy in a whiskey appreciation group that I've followed for a while, and their guiding rule is that the best whiskey is the whiskey you like to drink, the way that you like to drink it, and that applies to beer too. So I like these larger glasses that fit in my ginormous hands better. And honestly, if we're all willing to tolerate shaker pints whenever we go out, like any glass is better than that. So got a growler of Sawtooth Brewery's Helles here. Ooh. Nice. All right. So I've had this beer before. It is delicious and crystal clear. It is, I believe they're planning on canning it in the near future. I don't know when, but it pours that beautiful, beautiful straw color. White head. It's usually a little more carbonated than this, but the growler's been sitting for a while. But for a beer that is similar to and yet very different from Pilsner, this is a really, really enjoyable version. So just reacquainting myself with it. Got a nice bready sweetness to it. Got some of that crackery bread crust flavor, like when you get a white bread like fresh out of the oven and you eat the heel of it, where it's got, instead of just that rim of bread crust around the edge, it's also got the whole end of the loaf has that nice golden brown color. And it's not quite toast flavored, but this beer definitely leans in that direction. And then there's like a hint of a sweet aroma that I've been trying to figure out what fruit I associate it with, but as I'm tasting it, it's actually a lot more floral. Like, it's not a distinctive flower, but it's kind of like if you walk into like at a farmer's market where they have a bunch of fresh flowers, like it's that kind of aroma, and it helps bolster that sweet note that I was getting, that I compared to the heel of a fresh loaf of bread. And all of that is in this beer. So if you're anywhere that gets Sawtooth beers from Sawtooth Brewery, keep an eye out. like right now it's just on draft. I hope they can it. That would be awesome. So, cheers. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, like in the previous episodes of this podcast, I've talked about kind of things to think about as you're getting started. And I think this is going to be the last episode where I'm going to talk about things to think about as you're like before you really start buying things for your brewery. Like if you're doing extract beers to get started, like a lot of what I've talked about so far you can just kind of roll with. But like if you decide you're going to go all in on home brewing, and you're going to buy new equipment and new just new everything or used everything, there's a couple things to think about. Good beer. A couple things to think about as you are in the early planning stages, and it's really boils down to just one question in my mind, and that question is, what do I want to get out of the hobby? Like, are you getting into the hobby because you honestly believe that you want to be a professional brewer, and so you might set up your brewery a little differently, like in a more traditional sense. Like when I first got into home brewing, basically everybody had a 3-vessel brewing setup, which is similar to what most commercial breweries have, where you have a hot liquor tank, whether it's like in my case for my home brewing setup, it's just a kettle that I heat up water in, that I then transfer into the mash tun with, which again my setup is a cooler, and then I transfer from the mash tun into my boil kettle. And so it's a fairly common setup you'll see with a lot of people with 3 vessels. A lot of times gravity fed. Mine ends up being gravity fed, even though I don't have specifically a 3-tier. Like I have a workbench similar to this, that my kettle that I use for my hot liquor tank is here, mash tun is here, and then the boil kettle is just a burner on the ground at the end of the workbench. And it works great. There are also some people with 3-vessel systems, completely flat, everything's on the same level, and they use pumps to transfer. And so like that's another consideration, whether you're doing this to train to be a brewer professionally, or you like, the nice thing about having everything on the same level is it's generally going to be lower, like maybe waist level, maybe slightly above waist level, but you're still going to be able to reach the tops of the kettles to add water and ingredients and all of that stuff. And so it's going to be a lot more convenient, whereas even mine, I'm 6'8", but by the time I get my workbench, burner, workbench, patio block, it's about 2 inches thick, burner, kettle, like it's, the top of the kettle is basically at eye level, maybe even a little bit higher. Yeah, right around eye level. So it's like, I'm super glad I don't have to put grain in it or anything like that, because it's up high. But even putting, 5 to 10 gallons of water in there, if I'm dumping buckets in like I do during the winter so that I can leave my hose empty until chill time. But if I'm putting a lot of stuff in up high, like it's awkward, and it causes problems. So those 3-tier setups are, they're great. It's just an added challenge. But like, if you're not specifically training to be a brewer, or where you want to learn to use a 3-vessel system, and you're really focused just on being able to make beer, like there's some awesome electric setups now that really are not any more expensive than getting the hot liquor tank, the mash tun, and a separate boil kettle, and 2 burners that run on propane. There are at least 2 electric systems that you can get for less than $400. And there's the Anvil Foundry, which their 10.5 gallon system is $370, and like you can't make 10.5 gallons of beer on it, but it's big enough that you can make a hefty 5-gallon batch. And so there's that system. There's the Brewer's Edge mash and boil. These are all kind of upgraded electric versions of brew in a bag brewing, which is like, I've made great beer using brew in a bag techniques. I've made great beer using a grain father, which is kind of the first version of these electric brewing systems that was commonly available. And like, there's just a lot of flexibility in how you set up your system depending on what your goal is. But like, and even just brewing extract beers to play around with adjuncts and extra flavorings and weird ingredients and stuff like that, that's all good too. I mean, you can get a lot of really good flavor out of just making extract beer. So in addition to like space considerations for storing all your gear, like another thing to think about is just what you might find enjoyable in the hobby, and thinking about and talking to brewers about ways to accomplish that. Like there is, I believe the Pico Brew Company is no longer around, which I don't know what all the people who bought a Zymatic are gonna do with it now, because it required logging into their system to be able to do all the settings and stuff. But I'm not super familiar with that. But it, like, that was a system that really was targeted at people who wanted to play around with recipes but didn't want to have to manage the actual brewing process as much. It was basically you put all your ingredients in the right hoppers and the machine took care of everything else to make the beer. The other electric systems that I mentioned, like the Grainfather, the Anvil Foundry, and the mash and boil, like those are all still really manual systems where you're pretty hands-on. Like it'll control the temperature while you're mashing and stuff, but you're adding the water, you're stirring the grain, you're hoisting the grain basket out to let it drain on the top of the kettle. You're doing all of the manual labor parts of the process, but the system takes care of the boil and maintaining the temperature if you don't actually want to boil it, and stuff. So that makes that process, like those systems make the brewing process more simplified because everything happens in one kettle. And so like it's a great option, again, like even for people who are short on space, if you have enough room for what looks like a tall 5-gallon bucket, like one of these electric systems would totally fit. And one of the other cool things about those systems is that most of the gear required, like the chiller, the hoses, any hoses, and like if you have a pump for it and things like that, all of that actually fits inside the grain basket. So as long as you have, you know, I guess it'd be 4 square feet of floor space for storage, and then on brew day, you can get one of these systems and it'll fit in a very compact space. You don't have like a 72 quart cooler and a 10-gallon kettle for your hot liquor tank and a 15.5-gallon converted keg and another burner and a table to put it all on. It's all contained in the unit itself. So the electric systems really seem to be the best way to go for home brewers that just want to make beer. Like I'm actually seriously considering getting the Anvil Foundry, since I got rid of the Grainfather that I had before we moved. I am seriously considering getting that Anvil Foundry 10.5-gallon system. And one of the cool things about that is it can plug into a regular 110 volt 3-prong wall outlet that most people have, or to reach boil and higher temperatures more quickly, it also has a 240 volt option to plug into. The only drawback to the Foundry versus the other electric systems is it doesn't come with a pump. They do have an add-on pump, but if I decide to pull the trigger on the Anvil Foundry, I am actually gonna get a Mark II work pump with a stainless steel head rather than the Anvil Foundry one. Is March pumps and chugger pumps both have a special plastic that they use for their high temperature pumps. The Anvil Foundry pump looks like it's just regular whitish plastic, which I wasn't super crazy about. So I'm probably, if I do it, I'm probably gonna get the Mark II pump, which is $60, and then for another $25 add the stainless steel head for it, and then obviously ball valve and all of the barbs and attachments for hoses and stuff. Just because that single vessel brew in a bag system is super convenient. It's easy to manage without tons of storage space. And like the technology just keeps getting better on these electric brew systems. There's lots of the big manufacturers also have 3-vessel electric systems. If you have money to burn, those tend to be really expensive, but they're super nice. But then like jumping back to the start of the conversation, if you are really looking to get into home brewing as a practice field, or getting into commercial brewing, like that 3-vessel system really might be the way to go, just because you're getting used to transferring hot liquids from one vessel to another for just slightly more money than you're gonna spend if you put ball valves and everything on all of your vessels. You can switch over and get tri-clamp fittings. Like 1.5" tri-clamp is basically the standard for a lot of commercial breweries. There are larger sizes for larger vessels and specific tasks, but like 1.5" tri-clamp all day, every day. Like it'll get you used to how to lock them together, how to deal with the actual clamps. My biggest challenge is keeping both of the tri-clamp faces lined up while I'm attaching the tri-clamp, and like just getting used to how to hold it in the right position without holding so tight that every little move you make in your hand takes it off center and makes it harder to clamp. Like there's so many options. You can really get your brew system set up the way that you want to set it up. And like just I don't necessarily think that it's bad to buy twice, but the less times that you have to replace equipment, the better. So that's my thoughts on thinking about what you want to get out of brewing before you get started. And then for the last segment, what's going on in my life? Went snowboarding last Sunday and I sprained my ankle again, doing stuff that I've done a bunch of times, just following my son, recording him. Hit a bump weird, board went sideways, caught heel side edge, got slammed to the ground. But recovery's going quickly. I'm hoping to at least be out on some of the milder slopes next weekend. But hopefully you have a good beer that you can get at. Hopefully similar to this Helles from Sawtooth. Like, this is super tasty. Also, I do work there, but I don't think my opinion is just biased for that reason. But this is a damn good beer. I hope you have something similar or something crazy. So, but I hope you like it. Get out there, brew up an adventure. Cheers.